Welcome back, everyone. Evan, how you doing?
I'm doing great. I love that intro song, man. Din-din-din-din-din-din-din. I don't know if that intro was for you or if it was for me, but you know what? It's all good. How was your week?
It's a good getting ready to box in the octagon song, so it just like gets you pumping. You know, the shoulders are up and moving. You're ready to go. But welcome back, everyone. How's it going? We are two guys in hockey talk. We got a great show for you tonight. We have a wonderful interview that's coming in. But just before, Evan, do you have your beverage?
I have my bevy, man. We haven't done this for a couple weeks.
It's been a while, so cheers to everybody. Cheers. Make sure to like, share, subscribe, join our Facebook group, join our YouTube, join our Twitter. Evan, what's your Twitter handle? Where can people follow you and argue with you?
You can follow me at REV the CAT. And if you want to learn nothing about hockey, go follow my partner. Where do they follow you on Twitter?
You can follow us at hockey_2, where our two guys in hockey talk is, and I try to post as little as possible because I am not relevant. I know nothing about hockey, but you
said you could follow us, and it's just like you're doing the posting, dude, not me.
I hope I'm not posting anything that I should not be, but
just a note, everybody. Every Wednesday night, 7 p.m. Feel free to put your stuff in the comments box. We are going to take moments where we're going to pull up your comments. Maybe you got questions, some thoughts. We'll definitely go ahead and share that with the group here tonight.
We love it. We love it. So, Evan, why don't you introduce us to our guest tonight?
Sounds absolutely good, man. So let me just say this, guys. We have a pre-recorded. It was done. We recorded this 2 hours ago. We got on our guest that we are going to bring to you tonight. I have been following him for quite a while. He's one of my early connections when I got into the blogosphere back with Oilers Jambalaya back in the day. Wonderful man, one of the early scouts. By the way, I don't even think in this previously recorded interview we do, I didn't even let him know that I've used a ton of his stuff and his information. But you guys, this is a great, because he is a scout. You're going to learn all the information in this pre-recorded session. Again, it was only 2 hours ago. We'll comment live while we're playing it. We're going to finish this off and then go in. So I know you want your NHL fix. We're going to update you guys who are massive NHL, but we're going to talk about NHLers. But hey, without further ado, let me just go ahead and let's go to our previously recorded session just a couple hours ago. Guys, I'm excited to introduce our next guest, Willy Palov. He works for the Chronicle Herald out in Halifax, sports writer, scout, contributor to the Red Line Report, and we are going to pick his brain apart. Welcome, Willy.
How you doing, guys? Good to talk to you.
Thanks for coming on the show. Welcome. Evan, why don't you start us off?
All right. Well, I'll tell you what, because we have limited time, we want to get everything going here. Why don't we start off? Maybe give us a little idea so everyone can get an understanding of how you fell in love with hockey at, I'm guessing, a young age?
Yeah, I'm originally from Quebec, where hockey's like a way of life, right? So, uh, grew up watching the Canadians and reading about them in the Gazette, Montreal Gazette, and always followed that and kept a close eye on it. And then as you get older and start have to worry about doing a job, I figured that was the best way to stay around it. So yeah, I love it. It's great.
So, Quebec, Lake Colisée, you obviously were there a few times and actually in Quebec City too?
No, no, the province of Quebec. So I have, yes. Well, there's a two-part answer. I grew up closer to Montreal than Quebec City. But yeah, although the first times I was in the Le Colisée were for junior games, covering the Mooseheads, especially what year was it? 2012 playoffs with McKinnon and Drouin. They had a great series. Came back from 3 down, 1-7. So that was one of the last years, if not the last year of that building. So it was a good place to watch games.
Very nice.
All,
Very nice.
all, all, all I can tell you is when I went to Lake Colisée, it was 1987. My sister was getting married along the St. Lawrence River. We
Yeah.
went out there for the first time in my life, and going through the parking lot where the mall is, where Lake Colisée was, I can honestly say that you were not safe crossing in the parking lot. The cars literally were like speeding, going through like 40 miles an hour, going through those parking lots.
That's Quebec drivers for you. It's like walking in downtown Montreal. You gotta be you gotta have a head on a swivel there. So um, it's a different type of driving there. I'll put it that way.
I'm sure it hasn't changed in the years that it's been because I've been there myself, and yeah, it's a little chaotic. But I digress. So you fell in love with hockey at a young age, but you also got into journaling and journalism. How did that come about? When did you decide that I got to start writing about these sports and like learning everything and sharing it with the world?
Yeah, I played a lot of sports in school. I played soccer in university, and both my parents were coaches in phys ed, so we had a pretty athletic family. And coming out of high school, I knew I liked sports, wanted to be around it, but it hadn't occurred to me to go into journalism. I actually took 2 years off school between high school and university, and it was during that time I met somebody who had just graduated and was writing about entertainment, and said, "Yeah, well, I love music, so I figured I would just write about it." And that was kind of the first time it occurred to me. So once I got back to school, I thought that would be a good path for me, and um, got lucky coming out of school because like I said, had some sports background on my resume. So a job happened to open up a few months after I graduated, and I was really lucky to get it. And I've been doing it basically since graduation, same job.
So maybe kind of did you start working as far as contributing with Redline Report, or did you start with Halifax Mooseheads? Where did you get your start there?
Yeah, so I mean, these are going back to early days before the internet was much of a thing for sports journalism. I started laying out the scoreboard page. So I don't know how old your demographic is, but for people our age and older, that was your ticket to looking at stats. I did that for a couple of years. Then all obviously wanted to get into the writing side, and did that in university hockey here. Um, and then I started on the Mooseheads 2 years after that. So that was actually 1999. And so once I had that, that led to um, contributing for the Hockey News a year after that as the Quebec League beat writer. And once I was doing that, I reached out to Kyle Woodleaf at Redline Report a year after taking the Hockey News job, and just because I wanted to learn about scouting. And um, I don't do that work really for the money. It's more just to collaborate with that staff and keep an eye on it. And I'm personally interested in scouting, so it's been probably 20 years now doing that too. So it's obviously a good fit for what I write about, but also um, it's a good way to kind of keep on top of the youngest prospects that are out there.
So, I mean, you've kind of shared that you've been writing for a while. Two-part question, kind of, how do you find that writing has changed? I mean, you kind of alluded to it with you know, the newspaper back in the day versus now Twitter, and how information is shared so quickly, and you know, hockey writers are being online and sharing that information, and kind of how that how information is consumed versus how you present it to the public.
Yeah, I mean, the way back version of this answer is that, let's call it 15 years ago, when papers just started putting all their content online and not charging anybody. I'm not sure why they started to do that. Maybe they didn't really see where the internet was going and felt like people would always buy the printed product. But it just opened up a wild west, and now here we are trying to kind of get the horses back in the barn, so to speak. So at our publication, we've really put a lot of emphasis the last probably 5 years on really servicing our online audience more than anything. And you mentioned Twitter. You know, I first got on that. I think you said I got on that in 2011. So I've been on that over a decade, and that was at that time more of a way just to get an audience. And now it's almost exclusively just to promote your online stories. So a lot of our traffic comes from Facebook, Twitter, whatever else, and we're trying to create an audience that pays now. That's the biggest challenge for all of us, and we're getting there. You know, hopefully we'll keep adding to our membership and our subscribers, and hopefully keep this thing going for a while longer.
So when you were mentioning about Twitter, one of the funniest things early on. So I would be at development camps. So I did early writing for Oilers Jambalaya, and when I was at the development camps, and I'd be saying, you know, he had a great shot or something, and you know, the autocorrect, it would always keep saying to all the followers, he had a great shit. You know, yeah. And I was like, would you quit writing that? You know, it's just like it was constant. And then it became, anytime I wrote shot, it became shit in my my Twitter feed there. So someone told me, he goes, you write like shit. So Facebook, how would they look up on Facebook? We'll make sure we put it in our links here.
Yeah, I mean, I don't send it out through my personal Facebook. I'm not actually that active on my own Facebook.
Is it through the Chronicle Herald?
It is, yeah, the Chronicle Herald, and it's funny, like, things will go viral more there than they do on Twitter, which is unusual, because I mean, I'm not the only one who thinks this way. It's sort of the old person social media, right? Like, it's not Instagram or Snapchat or anything else, but it generates more traffic than Twitter a lot of the time. I think probably because of the share function on it. Right. Again, I'm not a tech guy, but once something goes viral, that's usually how is people send something to their feed, and then people pick it up. So yeah, it's kind of funny how it's swung back around to being relevant again. Facebook.
Well, it's interesting because I know our greatest followership actually is through Facebook, even though that they've messed around with things in the last year here. And by the way, our demographic audience, we pretty much, our higher viewership is between 35 and 55. So we're doing okay. Which is amazing because, like, Facebook, so you know, up here in Canada, throughout North America, but I mean, you get people coming in from places like Australia, all over Europe, even Russia during this time. And we've got some African and Indian countries as well. So that's been really cool with it. So let me just break this down. It must have been a pretty exciting. What was it like when Drouin and McKinnon you're covering the Halifax Mooseheads? That must have been like a dream come true with these stars, you know, coming into the system. I mean, and there was a story behind Drouin coming to play there, was there not?
Both of them, there was a story behind them coming there. So yeah, to answer your first question, it was great because, I mean, I have to tell you that as juniors, they were just dominant, and that's from 16 years old, which you don't see that often. First line players at 16. So wow. The first story, I mean, Drouin was drafted second overall in the Quebec League draft that year behind McKinnon, but McKinnon was drafted by Baie-Comeau, and he didn't want to play there. So as you know, with junior hockey, he kind of forced his way out, and Halifax paid quite a price to get him. But Drouin was already Halifax property before McKinnon was. So they had the top 2 picks from that year's draft, and they were coming off playing against each other at the Canada Games here in Halifax too. So a lot of the fans here in Halifax got to see them in that tournament, and they were both superstars there, especially McKinnon. So once training camp started, obviously people were pretty fired up to see Nathan play, but Jonathan didn't report right away. Not because he didn't ever want to play here. I think he just felt a little unsure about leaving home and being billeted and going to an English city. I wasn't in his head, obviously, but that's what I recall. And he didn't show up until Christmas time. So once he got here, he obviously settled in right away with Nate, and they became pretty fast friends. They would drive to every game and practice together. They were, on the same line, obviously, and then of course went on to win the Memorial Cup. So it was a fun time to cover that team, because of course the rinks were packed and they were doing something amazing every other night. So yeah, it was kind of the golden age for that team.
That's
if I can just say, something quick, Pavel, before you ask your question, it just got me thinking, because you're talking about Drouin, and I remember back then, and you still hear this now, everyone grabs a story. You know what Twitter's like and Facebook or whatever, when people get out there in these groups, and it's like rumors get made up they misread things. I remember there was a lot of things about him and having an attitude about who his coach was. There was all those stories out there, and I believe it was you who had shared some of this information you're sharing. So I think that's important for listeners to know, even when they go to judge a player today in the NHL, because they want to always talk back. Oh, remember when he held out or he did something like this, but they don't know the whole story behind it, eh?
No, yeah, it was for him never an attitude issue. Dominic Ducharme was the coach when those 2 kids were here, and they both will tell you that they had tremendous respect for him. There was no messing around with them. And what was interesting with Nate is the second year, so the year they won the Memorial Cup, Halifax ended up playing Baie-Comeau in the final, and they were understandably pretty sour about his decision not to go there. So I'll never forget the games there. There were tons of signs. They called him McChicken because he didn't want to report there, and there were signs, and he got a lot of abuse. It's a small, quite hostile rink. So I don't know that I would call that an attitude problem, him not showing up. He had leverage, right? And that's what people who follow junior hockey know. The top player doesn't have to go there if he doesn't want to. He's not the first or the last player to do that. So they were both good kids when they were here, and as I said, got along great. Got great leadership from Dom Ducharme too.
100%. And it's tough sometimes to kind of, have a voice as a player at that age, whether it's 15, 16, 17, and kind of make a choice, as difficult as it is to play where you want to play, and to make the choice for family, because being away from players, as COVID kind of showed us, even NHLers weren't very happy about it. It was kind of tough. To switch gears a bit, I mean, you've watched some greats, Jonathan Drouin in Montreal now, Nathan McKinnon just winning the Stanley Cup last season, playing unreal. What are your thoughts outside of Connor Bedard, some prospects in juniors that people should be really paying attention to? I know Evan geeks out about this with his top 10, 15 Revs draft picks, but what are your thoughts on people checking out some of the players that we should keep an eye on?
Everybody will tell you it's a pretty stacked year this year. The other kid that I'm trying to remember, they were in the U18s were in Michkov. Yeah, the U18s were in Red Deer in Alberta this summer. Am I right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So Michkov was a pretty good matchup with Bedard, and they're the top 2 right now. But there's Adam Fantilli's another WHL player. He's really good, and there's other guys now coming in who are making a move already, right? Like Edward Saleh from the Czech Republic's hot. So there are players in every league, and now that, as you mentioned, COVID's opening up, hopefully we'll see a lot of them at World Juniors playing as underagers. For the Quebec League, I wouldn't call it a really strong year. Ethan Gauthier is probably the top player right now. He'd probably come in the middle of the first round. Here in Halifax, Matthew Cataford's a pretty good player, but not somebody who's going to challenge for the top 10 or anything like that. Late first rounder at this point.
So here's a question. So last week we had a bit of a discussion on this. I'm going to be asking actually Carl Manson, editor for Hockey SE, I think it is, over there in Sweden, that posts all on the KHL stuff. He's got his own take on that in the political front. As well as a former guest of ours, Patrick Conway, who writes on post-Soviet hockey. So we're having a different take on where people think, because of this Russian factor, the war, when it comes to an NHL team drafting, maybe you know of some history years ago how they drafted. What's the possibility that Mishkov could drop out of the top two?
A real possibility. I mean, it's right now the CHL teams aren't allowed to draft Russian or Belarusian players. I'm no political scientist, but the situation in Ukraine does not seem to be ending as quickly as a lot of people were hoping.
Yeah.
Lately, Russia's pushing back against Ukraine, pushing back and forth, right? So, because there are other players that are already challenging him, like I said, a kid like Fantilli or some of these others, maybe they look at it as, if they're 2A and 2B, we'll go with the 2B guy and get the safe pick. But it's also October. By June, who knows? And also, too, it's going to come down to whether there are any sort of complications with getting viewings of these guys. If the IHF takes a stand against Russia at the World Juniors and doesn't let them play, that could be a problem. So I don't know. There's some unknowns right now, but at the same time, he's already had some good performances in front of a lot of scouts. So as long as he's playing well enough, I can't see him falling out of the top, I don't know, 3, 4, maybe 5 at the worst.
Yeah, and I think there's quite a few factors that go into it. I mean, I know there was a big deal of Shane Wright being picked fourth this year by Seattle, but it also depends on your team's needs. Montreal this year went with a winger because, Slavkovsky, because they picked up Kirby Doc, right? So they had another center with Nick Suzuki there. So it's your team's needs, whether or not they're going to drop you down to their AHL affiliate or whether you'll play. Like, how far are you from a rebuild? So, those teams at the bottom, whether it's Arizona, could be Philadelphia, we'll see how that goes. Kind of drifting to the side, I know we're throwing curveballs at you. And you're batting them like Aaron Judge, like 62, 63. Let's keep going. You're rocking it. You reported a little bit on the Mooseheads. The Mooseheads. Any fun stories around the rink there?
You know what? They had their home opener finally this past Saturday, and it was the biggest crowd since the pandemic. It's good to see that. There were 7,500 there, pretty full. It was talking to third-year players that night. It was their first real home opener, which is so odd, right? 2 years ago, they could only have 1,500 fans in the home opener, and then last year it was limited again. So here in Halifax, the crowds are back for the team because, as you know, with the cycles in junior, if you're tuned out for 2 years, you can't get in the rink. It can be an 80% turnover in the roster. So it's good to see people back, and we also have the World Juniors here in December and January. So it's been pretty, I mean, I don't have to tell you it's everywhere, but it's been pretty dormant the past couple of years. Interest was down a little bit because it's really a league and a level that needs live viewership. It doesn't really work as well on TV as the NHL does.
Yeah.
So it's nice. That's what I noticed the most is there's a buzz again. People are interested, and of course with the World Juniors here, it all kind of works together, right? So that's what I noticed the most right now.
That's pretty impressive. Okay. I just want to say one thing, and then you can ask your question. You're telling me there's 7,500 fans there. It seems like bigger than an NHL arena that's somewhere in the South that shouldn't be there, but just for my clarification.
Yeah, I did. I'm hearing you guys probably saw stories today too of the players grumbling about the
Yeah,
dressing room
Nick
and
Kiprill's.
yeah.
Sorry.
So I don't know. I mean, again, as a Quebec native, I hate to see that rink in Quebec City empty when they can't fill a rink in Phoenix, but you know, I'm not the only one who thinks that.
Yeah, Craig Morgan just came on today and said that some of the younger players don't really care. They just want to keep playing. But I think it's some more of the vets that are like, come on, like we didn't spend our whole life to get it to a 5,000 seat arena to finish the last 2-3 years of our career, And
Yeah.
so, and hey, you know what? I totally get it. I totally get it. You could be in junior rinks filling more. So, hey, let me ask you this question, because I think a lot of people talk about this. So you're seeing everyone talking about analytics versus eye test. This has been many discussions we've had around NHL teams and, whether they're pro or we're checking out. And so when you're scouting, what goes into scouting to make a good scout, and what are you watching for?
I don't know that I put as much emphasis on analytics as a lot of other people would. It kind of peaked, I felt like 6 or 7 years ago. Buffalo started it, and then they started to float the idea of doing scouting on video, because really it boiled down to all these analytics. And I'm not ready to say that was a fad, but the scouts I sit next to, or the way that we evaluate it's a minor consideration. So what I would say is, you obviously have to go with the eye test for their athleticism and their smarts and
Okay.
a whole list of things. But the bigger part in a lot of cases, when you're, I don't know, layering these guys from top 10 or to first rounders or second, is what they're like off the ice. How do they get along with their other teammates? I talk to these kids in person after most games. Can they hold eye contact? Do they shake your hand in a firm way? Or, can they have a coherent and intelligent answer to a simple question? Because there's a big difference between a first rounder and the type of personality you have to somebody who's a third or fourth rounder. And those are intangibles, I think, that are a bigger part of the equation than I think people would realize.
Interesting. So, a lot of times when you hear when you're talking about the scouting, the combine that happens every year for the NHL, there's a lot of questions that seem to be off ice questions. So that's kind of what they're probably looking for, is to see, are they character wise? Are they, personality? Are they more mature in their understanding? Is that kind of the stuff that they're probably looking for?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it could be small things, right? Like, what's an example? I mean, I've seen kids not treat the trainers respectfully, and that's a huge red flag. It might be a minor thing, but if he's not a respectful kid at 17 or 18, well, why would you invest? It takes some of these guys 5 years to get to the league, and if they're not showing good traits early on, you'll drop them in your rankings. Or if they're not good students, they're not committed to that, then that's another thing. Or the reverse, if they are good students, you want to see that. Or because all these things can factor into whether they'll be leaders or not, whether they'll be able to fit into a group dynamic. You have to be team players, right? So, and that's the biggest thing, because I mean, a scout who's been doing it longer than a couple of years can see pretty early, in a viewing or two, whether the guy can play or not, whether he can skate fast enough or, understand the game. But it takes a lot more digging. So I would think, I've never been in a team draft room like that, but I would think that's a pretty big part of it, is they got to find out how that kid's going to handle that situation.
So, question then, Slavkovsky last year going number 1. Where did Redline have him?
I can't remember. I would high. I might have been 2.
Okay.
We had Wright as 1. I remember that.
Yeah.
I'd have to pull it out.
So that's okay. We caught you off guard there.
Yeah.
Yeah, you scout. You don't have to actually be telling everyone all the time. Okay, so here's one of the things. This is as I follow. Watching their growth curve is always really important too, right? How consistent as they step up a level as you guys are scouting and you're trying to figure out where you see them at. One of the things that I'm struggling with, and I've had some conversations. I was shocked at number one. I think everyone was shocked that Wright didn't go, and then he went all the way, fell away to 4. There was different rumors. We can talk about that in a moment. But the reason is usually point production is very important on top of all those other characteristics for a number 1 overall. And this is one of the first drafts outside of a defenseman that I've ever seen for a team to go totally off the board for that number 1 overall.
Yeah, I mean, I felt bad a little bit for Wright because he missed a whole year for COVID, an important year, the year before. And it's not like he had a bad season last year, but I think people felt like he would be more dominant, and then he wasn't. And I'm sure there are lots of teams that had him 1 on their board. But then to not even go number 2 is where I was most surprised, because the thing with Slavkovsky is he played against men all year, played in the World Championships. Like, he had a lot of experience against men, and he did well. And as you know, he's huge already. He's 18 and he's playing at like 235 or something.
Yeah.
So I understand why the Canadians would like that, especially like you mentioned earlier. They acquired Doc, and they've got some depth at center finally. But was more surprising to me to see the Devils take Nemetz 2, and not that there's nothing wrong with that pick, or Cooley at 3. So I'm sure like the Kraken had to be pretty excited that he slid there. They were going to get a good player no matter what, but all of a sudden you go from hoping for the best to getting the guy that I'm sure at least half the teams had him 1. So what a steal for them, right?
100%. So, and maybe you can refer just quickly. Maybe you can kind of allude to, and I know we talked a little bit of analytics and the eye test. You don't usually see it, and I know speed is a big factor when picking a draft pick, but his size. And do you think size versus finesse is more important when scouting for a player? Because, I've watched Slavkovsky play, and he's a little slower because of his size, because, you want to be a little smaller. And, of course, you can grow into it. But when you see those bigger guys, the Tom Wilsons and the Phil Kessels, like big guys, they can score easily, which is what Slavkovsky can do. But do you think size is more important in the draft, or would it be finesse?
I'm thinking finesse now. Like, the game has changed a lot in the last 10 years. Obviously, if you have a total package like Slavkovsky, where you're big and skilled, that's a pretty much a no-brainer. But what's funny is just reading all the reports out of Montreal camp, and people talking now, he falls down a lot, or he looks slow. He's too big.
That's what I'm saying.
Right? So I'm not saying being big is bad, but I don't know that playing at 235 is good either. And especially he's trying to get used to smaller rinks and getting hit sooner than he might have before. He'll come around. I'm not too worried about him. He's going to be a good player, but I think if you're Montreal, they had I don't want to call Kotkaniemi a failed experiment, but they reached on him, and he was tall, and he, quote, fell down a lot too. And he's still time for him to be a player, but it didn't look like a good pick. And for the cynics, I think they're probably looking at him worrying right now, but I think in the long run, it'll be fine. But yeah, no, I mean, how big's Logan Cooley? Like 5'10"? He's not a big player, and he'll do great. So skill and speed now, I'd say, are the 2 leading attributes.
Okay, you may not be able to answer this question. I am going to throw a curveball at you. Coming back to Shane Wright, and then we have just basically one last thing. We want to talk about some of the former players in the NHL with the Mooseheads. Before we get to that, so around Shane Wright, there was talk around the draft, and again, I'm wondering if this is the same thing as Drouin. myself, I just don't buy into some of these stories about him having attitude, and then of course looking back at Montreal because he was mad, and now there's talks that he's mouthing off to Bilsma or whoever on the ice with the Kraken. Has there been some stories around? Maybe you can't answer this. I don't even know.
I hear those stories that you're hearing, but I mean, I'm not the OHL regional guy. I
Yeah,
mean, so it'd be hard for me to have my own stories. If he were from the Quebec League, it'd be easier to answer that.
fair.
But I did hear also. I mean, he kind of people thought he gave a dirty look to the Montreal table on the stage, and he had a different explanation, saying this was trying to pose for a photo. I don't know. I want to give him the benefit of the doubt. I don't know much about the kid as a person, um, but all I know is he went fourth. So as I was saying 10 minutes ago, we place a pretty high premium on character and personality, and
Yeah.
he can play hockey. We know that. So whether that's the reason he fell to four, I don't know. But I don't know. At this point, he's going to have to start doing more good than bad, I guess is the simplest way to look at it.
He'll have to
Agreed.
prove himself regardless. Go ahead.
And
Yeah.
there's been some plenty good players that have gone fourth in the first round draft. Mitch Marner comes to mind as one of the first, and I can consider him to being probably second or first if it wasn't for McDavid being first that year, right? So there's definitely something that he can prove, but he has to use that energy effectively. To change again, because this is like a roller coaster. It goes up and down. And we talked a little bit about Drouin and McKinnon. Were there any other, alumni that have gone through Manitoba through playing with the Mooseheads that, we should keep an eye on, that we know of, that you enjoy watching now in the NHL?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, before them, Jacob Voracek was awesome as a junior. Not just as a player, but he's an awesome personality too. He hasn't changed at all in the NHL. He says what's on his mind. I always liked him. He's getting a little older now at the NHL level, but right after McKinnon and Drouin went through, they had a really good run of Europeans. So Nick Ehlers was here. He's a tremendous kid. One of my favorites. Obviously amazing too. And he played with Drouin. They were awesome together. Like he was with Nate. And then after that, Timo Meier came in, another great player, kind of a late bloomer. He was lucky because if he hadn't been a late birthday, I'm not even sure he would have been drafted his first year over here. He wasn't good as a rookie. He was fine, but obviously pulled it all together as in his second year. So he was a treat. And then I'm waiting for Philip Zadina to break out. I don't think he's far off. I don't know that he'll do it this year, but he's a great shooter, and I really enjoyed him. So those were, I think, guys who went back to back, and then there was another year, and then Zadina was picked. I'd have to go back and look, but like I said, a real run of good Europeans, and they're all quality people too. So I like watching where they end up.
Yeah, and Detroit should be very happy with that pick. And Meyer's up next year for a big contract release, so we'll see how Mike Greer does that with the San Jose Sharks. Evan, any thoughts?
Yeah, no. Last question we have for you, Willie. If you could just maybe tell us and give all the viewers that are listening in on this that maybe are not as familiar with the Halifax Mooseheads, what are things looking like this year? What's the team shaping up? Are they playoff bound? Is this a rebuilding year, or where are we at it?
So they a longish answers. They hosted the Memorial Cup 3 years ago, and as you know, you load up for that, and they did well. They lost in the championship game, but that's always followed by some pretty rocky years. And the year after that was bad, and then they drafted a bunch of good players and got better. Last year were a little better, but this year I would call them sort of a second-tier contender. They can win. They could win it all. They have room to add a little more. And Zach Leroux, who's a first-round pick, Predators' first-round pick, is hurt right now, but he'll be one of the top probably 5 or 10 players in the league. And once he's back, they're right around 3rd to 5th. So they should put a good push on, and then next year they'll be just as good, if not better. So they're at that top part of the cycle right now. So I'm ready for that. It's always tougher covering a losing team. It's just a lot harder on the kids. So a little easier talking to kids after winning games. So that's what I'm looking forward to.
Talking about following a losing team, how would you like to be in Edmonton and Buffalo for quite a while in the NHL?
Yeah, better times now, no question.
Thanks so much, Willie. Do you have anything, Pavel?
Nope. Thank you so much for coming on the show, and we want to plug you in. Where can people find you on Twitter?
So it's my name at Willy Palov. I'm on Twitter. That's where I'm most active for work stuff. So yeah, check in there and then link up to some of my stuff.
All right. Thanks so much. It's been a pleasure. It's been an honor. Thank you so much for taking your time. Just so you guys know, this was pre-recorded because, Willie has to get to bed. He lives in the East Coast while you guys are awake in the West. So thank you so much. Hope to have you and connect with you soon. Best luck this season.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, guys. I enjoyed it. It was a good talk.
Thanks. Cheers.
Sorry.
What's happening, man?
How you doing? Thank you for bringing us back. How'd you guys enjoy that? We hope you liked that. Remember to give Willie a follow. He's got some great insight and some great articles. Check it out. Evan, let's talk hockey.
We'll talk about talking hockey. I am echoing.
You're echoing.
Am I the only one that hears this?
No, I hear a little bit of it, but I thought you were just proliferating your voice so that everyone hears it around the globe.
I
can't
one
of those old school cartoons, like those satellite things. You can't see me.
I can't see you, dude.
How about now?
I can't see you. Oh, there we go. Oh, okay. So my buddy took off here. It's just me sitting here all alone now. Maybe he'll cut back in. I just want to go up. Hey, Kyle, how you doing, man? You are a Bruins fan. Well, Kyle, tell us who is going to be the best Bruin this year, and tell us why. Right down there in the comics. Here, let me bring my partner back here.
Oh,
there he is.
Technical difficulties never happened before with technology in the history of technology.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, and there's no echo.
Oh, man. Hey, Zill, thanks so much, man. Yeah, Willie is basically when it came to the connections in hockey, and I got to thank him. Willie was the man. So for years, I can obviously expose this now. I had so many people early on when I was talking about scouting in the Quebec Major Junior League. And so I was getting my information, but I didn't want to tell anybody my source. And a lot of that information I got from Willie as I was following a bunch of his stuff, and occasionally I'd send him some extra stuff. So it gave me a lot better clue. So some of the stuff on McKinnon, man, that inside stuff, interesting stuff that he said about McKinnon, though, isn't it? Think about this. He won the Memorial Cup. The guy has done everything in hockey. Now he's won the Stanley Cup. He's played on Team Canada's left and right. I actually think that he is a little bit underrated by a lot of people.
I'm interested to see or curious to see as to why he hasn't won individual trophy yet, right? Not to take away from what he's done, but even, what the voting has been like for Nathan McKinnon. I mean, at the end of his career, we'd have to do a little bit of a history video of him, but to be nominated for Calder, what was that like in his year, for even the Hart, for what he brings to the team.
Yeah.
He should have at least won a Hart in his career, right? He's playing 9 years in the NHL. So and it's cool to hear that there's different stories behind NHL players, and situations are more fluid and complex than people give credit for. It's not just the simple teams draft a player comes plays, player succeeds, player goes on to have a great career. There's fluidity, there's dynamics, coach dynamics. Some coaches get along better with old players. We're seeing it now in the NHL. So you guys can let us know. Do you think coaching style needs to improve? Is it better? Is old school better? Is new school better?
So, okay, so let's go back and dissect some of the stuff Willie talked about, and then we'll talk some NHL stuff with you guys. By the way, just before, while you went off and came back on, Kyle, I was talking about his Bruins. So he says it always goes as Pasta and Marchand go. Okay, Kyle, we want to know, is it Pasta or Marchand? Who's going to come out on top this year?
I mean, Marchand's going to be out for a little bit, so it's got to be Pasternak who's going to have to, take it over. And I think Taylor Hall's injured as well for a little bit for a few weeks. So
yeah, but according to Zylstra, who is commenting here tonight, by the way, somewhere down, she's a truck driver. She's somewhere down Reno last week. I think she was somewhere close to Vegas, and so now she's around Reno. So she must keep trucking through every Wednesday. I don't know. So, by the way, Zylstra has said she's planning to take in some Vegas games, so she'll send us some pre-recording live from a Vegas game at some point. So we'll give you guys a little sneak feature. If any of you guys are going to NHL hockey games, you know what? We'd love to take a 4-5 minute clip if it's a little bit the night before or sometime that week. We'd love to put it on. Let's get a feel from in behind the scenes. We're going to be doing that with Sean Fiery, right?
Yes, we are. And there's a little snippet coming in November where I will do a little bit of on live shooting, which we'll present later on. Jordan's coming from that's been on the show, and he's a big fan of the show, and he's probably our top fan. But there's a little secret thing we're going to plan out in November, myself and a few other people. So I'm going to get to that to you. But go ahead.
And guys, I know nothing about this, so I guess I'm going to get surprised. Okay, so let's go back and dissect a bit. I want to talk about this. Now, Willie, some of you are going to say it's old school, but I heard him say, Pavel, he was talking about scouting. And the scouts he talks to, now, obviously there's a bias to the scouts he mostly connects with, the Quebec Major. They're not looking at a lot of analytics, and we're made to believe in the NHL that there's a lot of analytics. I just heard on Stauffer's show, Oilers Now today, that I think it's Scott was just saying that they were one of the first when they had Tyler Dello, and they've always been really strong, even though they don't advertise it. And I know I guess just a couple just got let go out of Toronto, so they're down to 9 or something in analytics. But I think people are overblowing analytics. Scouts themselves are not looking at analytics as much, obviously, according to Willie. This guy has been scouting for the last, dozens of years, right? What's your take on that? Are you shocked or surprised, or did you think that was what was happening with a lot of scouts?
I think it also depends, kind of like we talked about, the development of information sharing, where, the newspaper to Twitter and to Facebook, and what's the best way. And people think, Twitter's the best way to get news. And maybe it's immediate and quick news, but it's not the substance where the majority of people go to, right? People still follow articles, follow up on the information. And I think the same thing is with analytics. Analytics has a place. It's very important. A lot of teams use it, if not all. And, there's a comment coming, but yeah, there you go. He is. Evan is the biggest Chris Russell analytics guy. And I mean, really, at the end of the day, an eye test shows you so much more. Nobody thought, and I point to Braden Point in Tampa Bay, who he was and what he was going to do. He was nobody on anyone's radar. And when he was picked, I think it was 84th or something, like very late in the draft, everyone was surprised. The 5th round pick. And yet, he's now a 2-time Stanley Cup champion because of something a scout saw with his eyes and said, this guy is going to be a top 6 center in the NHL.
Another interesting point I like to pull out of Willy's Palov's interview that we did with him is that, and again, I just can't say enough. Thank you, Willy, for doing that. If you're catching this podcast later in the morning or something, because I know you had to go to bed. That's what happens when you're on the East Coast.
You can also listen to us in bed to fall asleep, because that's how it works.
And by the way, guys, not only can you follow us on Facebook and YouTube, you might be following us post. A lot of our viewers come on afterwards and watch within the next 24 hours or so. Some of you are rewatching. I don't know if you're crazy enough to rewatch unless you want to kind of find all the mistakes that Pavel made throughout the show. By the way, you said you made a mistake in that interview and called them the Manitoba Moose Heads.
I thought I said,
but you didn't. Or something. But no, I don't think you did. You did.
I clearly overanalyzed myself. So this is what I do. Is if everyone wants to know how this works, is after this show, Evan and I sit down and he shows me the tape of what I do and don't do right. and then he marks it with a big red marker and says, "This is what you got to improve on." So then I'm slugging away during my daytime job, fixing my mistakes so I'm better for the next show. And yet it seems to be reversed because I keep making more mistakes because I know nothing about hockey. But I digress.
Oh man, that's so funny. But the players that he mentioned, we didn't even think about some. So,
Yeah.
and he talked to us, and I'll let you finish this off. What he talked off air right after we finished. So he talked about some people we forgot. Jacob Voracek came from the Halifax Mooseheads. Jonathan Drouin, Nathan McKinnon, Nick Ehlers over in Winnipeg. These are star players. I mean, these are good players. Personally, I think in the Quebec League, it's been one of the best places at producing hockey. He talked about 7,500 fans. I mean, that's amazing. But he did talk about a player we didn't mention that we'd ask him, and he missed it. He apologized after. He talked about a player. Maybe if you can mention a player, and for Calgary fans, they're going to want to hear this and tell us what he had to say about him.
Mackenzie Weegar, he played for the Halifax Moosehead, and he has been phenomenal. Now, I know he really had his coming out party last year with the Florida Panthers, and now he is a Flame. But according to Willy, like, he's an outstanding guy, just all around dynamic, great, very personable, very easygoing, gets along with everybody, like the kind of guy you want in your locker room because he brings people together. He's very positive, and he produces on the ice. He's the top 4 defenseman. He really can produce. I mean, Calgary's lucky and to have him. And, you know, as Elliot Freeman reported earlier, he may be signed by the end of the week potentially because he doesn't want to talk about contract extensions in the offseason. And I think Brad Treliving is going to try to make it happen because, you know, they like that guy and he would be a good fit.
Well, and Willie did mention, he says, watch for him because he'll be one of the top players in analytics. Even though Willie doesn't follow a lot of analytics in his scouting, he actually must follow analytics to know that the analytics will look good. So, guys, we don't have a lot of time left to wrap up our show here. Hey, Jordan makes a good point here. To be fair, Manitoba does have a moose head on their jersey. So it'd be easy to get confused for a guy that only follows the NHL.
That's true. Jordan actually knows more about hockey than I do. Maybe we can switch where he replaces you, and then I can really know nothing about hockey.
Okay, so I why don't we each pick one thing that we just want to wrap up today? I want to talk about the Vancouver Canucks. You got a team you want to talk about? Something before we do? Okay, I'll go first. You go next, and we'll wrap. Okay, guys? I want to talk to you guys about the Vancouver Canucks. One thing that was really important, there's 2 things to the Canucks that I want to mention here. Now, I know they're going to be playing in only 8 minutes. They're going to be hosting the Edmonton Oilers tonight. You can stream it online. If you guys need a link, we can be able to send you a link. Just email us over at two guys hockey talk at gmail.com. But I do want to mention, one of the things that they need is a good defense. Very important. JT Miller has talked about this and said a lot of the blame falls on the forwards last year. And I think Bruce brought that up because they're not working as that full 5-team unit. That was an issue we know in Edmonton. We know that was an issue in Philadelphia. We know it was an issue in New York for the New York Rangers only about 5 years ago. And so a lot of times a team could be a lot better if they knew how to play that 5-team unit. So JT Miller talks about that. Interesting enough with it. And I think I brought this up. So guys, look to see how well they play coming out of the gate on defense with the 5-team unit. That to me is going to tell you, I think those first 7 games is what you're going to need to look at. If they're not doing well, I think it might be a long season. Now, let's talk about Americans before I wrap. Americans on the Vancouver Canucks. Who says Americans won't play and sign in Canada? Have you guys looked at some of the information that's sitting out there? I want you guys to think about this. JT Miller, Brock Besser, Connor Garland, Quentin Hughes, Demko, Myers. These guys are all Americans. So Canadians, get off your high horse. Quit acting like Americans are a bunch of babies and want to play in the States because you're full of it. By the way, American fans, you're absolutely welcome that I'm kind of boosting you guys. The Americans don't always want to play in the States. They just want to play in a place that matches with their values, their morals. And some of them they like to be home, closer to home. That's just
Yeah.
the Goudreau went to go back to the US. I mean, it's easier to travel back and forth over time. Some just move into Vancouver. So anyway, that's my rant. You got 3 minutes. Go.
To be fair, Vancouver's a beautiful city to live in and play in.
Absolutely.
So I wouldn't just what's it called consider that people don't want to go there. Yeah, John Wick is talking about go Caps, but John Wick is pretty intense because he would eliminate a lot of things, quickly, even with a pencil. That's a little inside joke if you watch the movies. What I want to talk about, and this refers a little bit or connects indirectly to Vancouver, is Matthew Barzal signing his 8-year, $73.2 million contract today or yesterday. And it's a big deal because Bo Horvat is probably looking at that and saying, hey, I'm worth almost that, given what his points are. I think he had 76 points in 59 games last year for Barzal, and it was the first time they were out of the playoffs. Now, what does that do for the Islanders? What does that look like down the middle for them? And TJ and the Grumpy Cat and the Grumpy Old Man can probably fill us in, and we can connect with them and see what their thoughts are on the Islanders. But really, is Lou making space for anything else? I know he leaves all his deals to the last minute, but will the Islanders be good enough to make it back to the playoffs in the Metro this year? And my question is, I know they signed Barzal. I know he's a stud. Will he put up points when he couldn't under Barry Trotz? Or is this is this what we're getting? Because he's under a point per game player in the last little bit. So I'm wondering what effect that will have on the Islanders. And you guys can let us know. Do you think the Islanders will make the playoffs this year?
Okay, I'm going to go to Jordan's comment in just a moment. I scrolled up. I wanted to answer something earlier. It was brought to our attention by Hans. Hans says that Don Cherry saying Austin Matthews is going to score 73. You commented earlier in there. Does anyone else believe he can score 73? I do not.
I do. I don't know if he'll be 73, but I think he can do it because he's a great goal scorer. It's just been a while since, I think since Pavel Bure, since there's been a player that scored back-to-back 60-plus goals in the NHL. That was the last time. I think it was 2000, 2001. But what I really think is that he can do it. It's just he has to stay healthy. I know his wrist has been bothering him. He's had surgery, and his shoulder has been an issue. And that's his, forward, but he goes, what now?
Yeah, I asked, will he score 73? You go, I do. Well, I don't know if he'll score 73. And then you said, yeah, and he could if he doesn't have. Dude, you are confused. Okay, let's get to the last comment of the night here. I just want to bring up, this is a whole different thing here. But he says, Barzal, great deal, but not a great team. I'm going to say, not a great team right now with older players. But Jordan, man, how is that a good deal for a guy that his first season he did well? He cannot make a point a game, and he's making over 9. Dude, I can't get it. I don't get it.
Different system.
Agree.
Trotz plays a defensive system. That's all. Let's see what the new coach brings in.
Woo, man. I do think so. We have a new connection. I don't know if we'll get TJ and the Grumpy Man on this year. We got a new connection in the island that Jamie Basco set us up with. I do want to just put a quick push in here, guys. I want you to remember every Wednesday night, 7 p.m. live on Facebook, YouTube. Subscribe on YouTube. Like when you come on Facebook, follow, share. Make sure you get our shares out. Follow us on the Sports Empire Network. You can catch everything else on them. You can also follow us on Twitter at Rev and Ev and at Hockey Talk. I do want to say that so we did talk about when we were on just a couple weeks ago, we talked about who would be on next. So next week we have Kevin Francis. Now, Kevin Francis actually writes for Hockey Buzz. And as we all know, it's a rumor site. And so a lot of people, it's funny, you know how people say who listens to Nickelback? In the meantime, they sell millions and millions of records. A lot of people say, oh, who goes to Hockey Buzz? Well, obviously, if you know about Hockey Buzz, you've actually gone there. So you got to take your nose that's so high and bring it down and take a listen next week, because we're going to have Kevin Francis on, man. And I want to hear some of his takes, but I will say this, Kevin Francis, good man. And the stuff that he shares, he's not throwing stuff at the wall. I've been following him for a while. I like what he's doing. Go check out his site on Hockey Buzz. Take some of his reading. He's going to update us on the Ottawa Senators. And that's that whole issue. We're going to talk about the Ken Talbot, what's happening on the goalie front. I mean, it's going to be a good show. Oh, Jordan says, I want to talk about Eklund. Well, we'll see. If you guys want, and I don't know if he's watching the show, but Richard Cloutier used to write for Hockey Buzz and also Puckpedia, who I actually know, was it Puck something it was. I used to write. Yeah, I used to work with him. Puck Rant. So I did writing actually with Richard Cloutier, who actually wrote and threw stuff out there. He's actually on Twitter. He said he would come on the show. I know a lot of people find him controversial, but he's fun. So anyway, I want to mention Kevin Francis. The week after, guys, we got former NHLer, Atlanta Thrasher, and Florida Panther Kyle Rossiter. We're going to talk about fighting. We're excited. After that, we got Carl Manson talking post-Soviet hockey, what's happening in Russia. Man, our guests are coming out, and it looks like we're really close. We got a surprise we're going to be sharing with you for those that are local in Alberta about a coach that we hope to have on. We won't release anything yet till we get it finalized here. But, man, the guests are coming out of the network, not because of us, but they're because of you. Are thousands and thousands of people that are following us from around the world.
I'm going to be narcissistic and say it's because of me, but whatever.
Last thought, man.
It's exciting. Preseason's going on. I'm loving it. I love hockey on my TV. I love being able to watch again, and I'm excited for what's to come because this is going to be a wild season.
Exciting. All right. Well, then, in the meantime and in between time,
keep your sticks on the ice. Stay safe, everyone.